Hi guys, my name is Daniel. Here's what I want to talk about. My dad went missing for almost a year, and I feel guilty about it. I'll start from the very beginning. My dad was the most positive person on earth. For as long as I can remember, he was always glowing with happiness. But everything changed after one incident about a year ago. He didn't come home from work one night. At first, my mom and I thought that everything was okay, but he still hadn't shown up at 9 o'clock that evening. That's when we began to call our friends and his colleagues. No one knew where Dad could be. Then, Mom found Dad's boss's phone number, and we called him. He surprised us a lot when he said that day, my dad didn't show up at work, and he didn't answer his phone calls. It was then that we really began to worry. What's happening? Where was he all day? We called the police, and 2 officers came to us and started asking us questions about my father. Soon afterward, they found him. He was in the hospital, so my mother and I rushed there. When we got to the hospital and finally saw him, he was asleep. He was covered in scratches and bruises. There were pieces of glass in his clothes, and his shirt sleeve was almost torn off. The doctor said that he had a concussion and could have some sort of short-term memory loss, but everything else was fine. Officers said that they found him outside the city. Looks like he was driving at a high speed, lost control, and his car ended up in a ditch. He was very lucky that he survived this accident. We spent the whole night in the hospital, and when Dad woke up, we asked him what happened, and his answer shocked us. He said that he flew off the road because he was hit by another car. It was a serious allegation, so the police started an investigation. They came to our house a few times and asked a lot of questions. About a month later, they sent us a letter with their expert's conclusion. According to this letter, the car didn't have any traces of paint from another vehicle. To put it simply, no one had rammed my father's car. Dad was angry. He complained about the police inaction and insisted that he was telling the truth. But my mom was upset. She believed the police and thought that my dad was lying and hiding something. Besides, where was he all day? Why didn't he go to work? To these questions, he replied that he just didn't remember. So my parents sometimes fought about it, and I didn't know who was right. But I knew that Dad was acting weird. He always covered the windows with curtains. His phone was often turned off. It seemed like he was afraid of something, but he wouldn't say what. In general, the atmosphere in the house was strange. But then something happened that really scared me. I was home after school doing my homework when I heard the front door slam loudly. I went down and saw my father. He looked scared. He had huge eyes and could barely breathe. When he caught his breath, he finally said, "I saw her again! That car!" Then he ran up to the table and began to write something on a piece of paper. He tried to remember the car's license plate number, but he couldn't. Dad was really worked up. He nervously walked around the house saying that Mom will finally believe him now. But she didn't. After all, there was no evidence. So they just bickered again. And I can understand Mom. Her husband is acting strange, obviously hiding something. Of course she didn't believe his words. Since then, Dad has spent a lot of time on the computer. He was Googling something, printing some articles. In the garage, he hung up a board where he attached various photos and documents. He even installed security cameras around the house. Apparently, he was determined to prove to me and my mom that he was right. It looked more like paranoia. But this is my dad. He always goes all out. And so we lived like this for 2 months. In the evenings, Dad sat in the garage and watched the video from the cameras. I kept hoping Dad would admit that he was wrong, or finally tell us why he didn't go to work that day. But once, at dinner, or rather, when I was having dinner with my mom and Dad was sitting in the garage, we heard him shouting, "Bingo! I've found it! Ho, ho, ho!" He came into the kitchen with a piece of paper in his hand. He said that the car that hit him got caught on camera, and now he has her license plate number. A couple of calls to his friends at the police station, and the case will be solved. But it only provoked another fight, and this time my father was just on edge. I tried to say that he was wrong. So much confusion. Why was that car driving by our house? How did he know it was the right car? What friends at the police station? But he shouted, "Once he finds out, Mom and I are going to apologize." And left. We heard the car start, and he just left. My mother was very upset. She said that Dad's stubbornness and lies were ruining their relationship, and she was sick of it. But I was more worried about my dad. It's late. Where did he go? I had this feeling that something bad was going to happen, and I was right. He didn't return that night. I told my mom to call the police in case he had an accident again, but my mother was so mad at my dad that she wouldn't listen. He was still gone in the morning, so I called the police myself. For several weeks, we talked every day with the officers, looking for him in our city and in the neighboring towns, and we got no results. My father was eventually reported missing. I can't tell you how I felt then. The loved one who filled my life with laughter and positivity just disappeared. I lost my hope and thought he was dead. I grieved deeply for him. Almost a year later, we got a call. Mom picked up the phone, and then her face changed immediately. Our father was found in another state, in a hospital. We immediately went to him. I could barely recognize my dad. He looked almost like a homeless man. Dirty hair and beard, shabby clothes. As it turned out, he had a mental disorder that was progressing. It wasn't related to the accident, but because of this coincidence, he became paranoid and the disease developed. Dad remembered us, and he knew where his house was, but he was sure he had to find the people who pushed him off the road a year ago. Now, I feel guilty that my father left that night. He just needed help, or at least to be heard. After all, everything indicated that he was not healthy mentally, but Mom and I just didn't listen to him, and we thought he was lying. Yes, we're both to blame. My dad was hurt because of our carelessness.